I do want to ask you a little bit about Dusty Rhodes again, because something that Dave wrote here, I thought was a light bulb moment for me in our research. Because Dusty Rhodes, I think everybody listening to this knows, was one of the greatest attractions of all time. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say pre Hulk Hogan, nobody sold more tickets in the world than Dusty Rhodes. When it came to being a draw in America, certainly, Dusty Rhodes was number one, and it wasn't even all that close. Of course, Hulk Hogan changed all that with Vince McMahon going into his national expansion or even global expansion.
Well,
but Dusty Rhodes was the high watermark. Go ahead.
I'm going to use your footnote. Who was Vince's first choice or thought
Dusty.
about it?
Dusty.
And look, I don't have to tell you that, Jerry Lawler talked a lot of folks into the building with his mouth.
Yes.
Dusty, a lot of people in the building with his mouth. You can kind of go across territory by territory by territory, but at the very top, you'd have to, just because Dusty worked in the bigger territories, Dusty's at the top.
Here's where I was getting with that. If you go back and you watch Jim Crockett television, the TBS show, the studio show that went coast to coast and helped put Jim Crockett Promotions on the map and made them a major player and real competition for Vince McMahon.
605.
When you take a look at that show, that audience, even though Dusty is the number one babyface, that studio audience, a good portion of them fucking hated Dusty. They cheered the Horseman. They cheered Ric Flair. And they booed Dusty like nobody's business. Even though Dusty was the guy selling the tickets, he was the babyface. So I'm saying all of that to say when Dave wrote this, it was a light bulb moment for me. Dusty on the February 11th show did the gimmick where both Nash and Jarrett were banned from the building. If you notice, he kept Jarrett from being in front of the people at both tapings. This is from Dusty's own experience. In the 80s, the Atlanta fans who went to the old studio tapings hated Dusty, largely because they loved Flair and the two were always feuding. At the house shows, there were even some markets where Rhodes would be cheered, but most markets were split, at least in 85, 86, and Rhodes versus Flair was usually a great business match. But it looked bad when Rhodes, who was pushed on TV as the top face in the universe, would be booed so horribly. So Rhodes just stopped going in front of the people and would do his interviews via satellite or backstage. So they taped the deal via satellite, claiming Jarrett was in Nashville and Nash was in Hollywood, I guess trying to act like Nash was a big movie star. I think that's a stroke of genius. And who would have ever thought that you as a heel and Dusty as a babyface had anything in common? But if there's pushback from the fans, that's it. That commonality never really clicked for me that, hey, the fans in the studio, for whatever reason, aren't digging it. But all the other metrics support that this is the right way to do business. Like, buys are there, ticket sales are there, ratings are there. And that's the story of TNA here. But with this subset of fans that come to the tapings, they don't like it. We can't let that small group of fans dictate our business for every other angle, every other aspect. I thought that was genius. And that Dusty could pull that from his own experience, that never really clicked for me until we were doing research for this show.
How about that? When I looked at it and tried to conjure up the different memories, I know there was a couple of times, I'm not saying on this episode, we did a press conference one time. There were certain things that just out of time that we would kind of make suggestions. And I'm not saying just me, kind of collectively, like, hey, this may be better off. Let's do this where we can control the time and pre-package it. And Jeff doesn't have to get long, or Kevin doesn't have to get long, or whatever it may be, and leave the wrestling content. And also when you're taping a couple episodes, if that was the situation. Anyway, to this day, Conrad, though, the manipulation, if you will, there's all kinds of legendary stories through the years that, Vince would sweeten the audio on this and add the boos here and add the cheers here and put this stuff out and have them redo a finish to make it look different. All this, it's done, but on this set of circumstances, I didn't know until I read the research that WP. Now this is early 80s that Dusty and Flair had the same issues. going way, way, and I know I've heard my dad talk about, when Lawler turned babyface, there was a section of people that absolutely could not get over his past. And no matter how big of an ass kicking babyface, there's some folks in the audience that still hated his ass. Anyway, the wrestling fan, but pretty cool. The dream, we all pull stuff from our experiences, but did you know that he got booed that much in the studio?
Oh, I was watching it. Yeah. I mean, not at the time, but I mean, as an adult, yeah, I've gone back and watched it, and I never really drew the correlation between you and him. But when I read that in the Observer, it was like, oh yeah, shit, that is exactly what Dusty dealt with. Hey, so you're expanding internationally, and I know that's your jam. I know in real life, international expansion is where you see the growth for WWE and all wrestling. But the company in this era signed a deal with RDS, and that's an all sports channel in French. It's going to air in Eastern Canada and in Montreal. You're even starting to get an opportunity with a company called Eurosport, and they're going to give you 2 free specials or two opportunities to do specials. They're also going to have an opportunity to have you show the program in Japan. So it said that, hey, this doubtful that there's even going to be 1,000 orders in Japan, but hey, every little bit helps. In this era, only like 5,000 pay-per-views are international for WWE, but you definitely had to see, listen, we're chugging along and we're getting on TV, but we're having to pay for that, right? But the real growth opportunity is to take the blinders off and say there's more to life than just North America. What can we get in Canada? What can we get in Japan? That's the real new frontier, right?
It is. And we started, as we know, just I'm giving myself a timeline, June 2002. So now we're not even to June of 2005. And I know our first small, tiny deal was out of India, but just kind of the growth internationally and the momentum, if you will, that we just kept plugging away at it. And none of these were big money deals, but the exposure and look, the content was already being created. And that was the thing that, when you sit down and really look at it and say, all right, we're paying to be on FS1. If we can get a few bucks here and a few bucks there, just to kind of continue to grow grow all the revenue streams. Man, that was a strategy then. And I still think to this day, India alone. Well, let's throw in Pakistan. India and Pakistan, just those 2 countries alone have 6 times as many people as the United States. And you go, yeah, but the economies and this and that, and like, yes, but it's slowly coming. It's all eyeballs, impressions, and maybe Conrad, you'll give us a lesson here on sales and impressions. But that's the internet. When you open everything up to internationally, just your potential is so much bigger.